Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jon Granger. I'm a registered migration agent, and today I'm going to talk to you about the potential international student pathways through early childhood training in Australia to qualify as an early childhood teacher through Australian university programs, and the potential for skilled migration pathways that those occupations may have. Now, I've got a short presentation to go along with this in order to just help you really understand the key points that we want to make. Now, to give you background to myself, our company, we are registered migration agents. I'm a former national president of our industry body, and I've been doing this type of advice for 20 years. Our specialisation is very much around international students and their journey. We do, of course, a wide range of other visas beyond the student market, but it has always been a core area for us over 20 years. In that time, we've seen a lot of changes with immigration. We've seen a lot of changes in the labour market, a lot of changes in the student market. One thing is clear to me that there are certain occupations that have long-term opportunities for skilled migration in Australia and others that don't. And it's really important for international students to try to understand that and to ask the right questions, get the right advice around what the potential is for that occupation to still be of value in the Australian labour market by the time they graduate, and what potential immigration outcomes exist within that space. The key thing I must, however, emphasise is I can't predict the future. If I could, I'd be at the racetrack or the casino instead of here on a webinar with you today. Now, having said that, it's a classic question from international students. If I study this, will I get PR? The honest answer is we don't know. An immigration minister doesn't know. Nobody knows, because we don't know what the Australian economy will look like in 2-3 years' time when you graduate. We don't know what skilled occupations will look like, what lists will be available, what immigration rules will exist. What we therefore have to do is do some, what I call risk analysis. In the same way as anyone buying a house or investing in business or shares, is to look at what's the risk analysis and return on investment. You won't ever get a guarantee that the house price will go up or down. You won't ever get a guarantee that you'll migrate with a particular course. But we can look at the broader set of fundamentals and question that. Now, in all aspects of life, I believe that there are three key fundamentals, especially for international students. You will always pay tax, you will always die, and immigration is going to always change. We know that. I've been seeing immigration rules over 20 years continually change. They will change in response to the global financial crisis. They'll change in response to the current COVID-19 global pandemic. They have changed, and we're going to see more change in the future as the Australian labour market is affected, the global economy is affected, and therefore jobs in Australia are affected. What we need is skilled migration to supplement what we can't get from the Australian market in terms of our labour force. And that's where international students come into it, international student pathways, where Australia has trained an international student based on the standards in Australia. And that is a viable government policy that's been around for 20 years, is to retain our best and brightest and the ones that we train, but not everybody. And that's where strategically international students do need to really question what's the occupation, what's the viability, what's my return on this investment. Now, when we look at that, we look at a range of factors, and starting with the labour market, we look at the economy, we look at commentary, we look at detailed analysis of where the skills shortages are and where they are not. Over the years, we see skilled occupation lists come and go. Those lists will change. They will be changing every year. They always do. The purpose of that is for it to always be revised. COVID this year is a perfect example of what industries are affected, and Australians are losing their jobs and unemployment's going up, and what industries are not affected or are even busier and need more people, and we can't get them from the Australian labour market. At the beginning of COVID, one of the key first reforms that immigration brought in was to define what we now call critical sectors in COVID-19, and to give more support under an immigration framework to the industries labelled as critical sector. Childcare is one of those sectors. We've seen that there hasn't been a loss of jobs in the childcare sector. We just have an ongoing need, and that sector needs the international students and temporary workers who are in the country already working in it to not lose their jobs and not to be, if their visas are expiring, to have other solutions to keep them in the country to support those industries. One of the interesting areas that I see is a particular report or an article that came up about a year ago, pre-COVID, from an academic from the University of Melbourne. And that has gone into just looking at the key question in the questions fundamentally around early childhood trained teachers, degree qualified, not diploma qualified. Do we need them? Fundamentally, that report kind of speaks for itself. The demand for degree trained early childhood teachers by 2023 is going to be 49,000. A number of Aussies that actually are currently enrolled in degree programs to fill that labour shortage is only 4,000 a year. So based on other analysis of pass rates, dropout rates, etc., there's a critical factor that we'll have a shortage of 17,800. And basically at least a third of all childcare operating services may not be able to operate without, if they can't employ a degree qualified trained teacher. That's critical for business, that's critical for parents, that's critical for kids. That means it removes the politics around the immigration where everyone kind of agrees we need to support that sector. And if that means supplementing it by pathways that we can get from Australian trained international students, then that's where state governments and federal governments kick in to create those pathways. And we'll talk about some of those opportunities. To get into a pathway is to choose the right degree program in early childhood training. They fall into bachelor degree training and also postgraduate training. Within the bachelor degree, we're looking at all of our teaching programs are 4 years, secondary or early childhood teachers. So you're looking at a 4-year degree. With a graduate diploma that looks at someone who has a degree from another discipline, there's a potential to convert into that qualification or that occupation after just 1 year of training, teacher training. Alternatively, there is a pathway with a master's for 2 years. If you're entering into a bachelor degree, there are 2 ways to enter: direct entry to the 4-year degree based on high school qualifications and competitiveness, or you might go through a vocational training certificate 3 and diploma in a TAFE or private vocational college, which would then get credit transferred further into a bachelor degree. And that's also a common pathway. That allows people to come through as childcare workers and room leaders and then upgrade further to ECT qualifications, which gives more scope under the migration program. There's also the potential to go through a master's degree program and also the graduate diplomas. Those require at least holding a degree qualification from your home country as opposed to Australia that's equivalent to an Australian bachelor degree, and then being assessed on the quality of the degree and also English language requirements. We would recommend that you talk to one of your Go Study counsellors to have a closer look at individual university entry requirements around the degree and also the English language requirements. Well, one of the strategies that we've looked at, and not all universities offer it, but where a university can offer a 1-year graduate diploma, existing ex-international students who now hold graduate 485 visas, and this may be relevant for those who have been through the Cert 3 and diploma pathway and now have the work rights on a 485. You could use that visa period to study online or on campus the graduate diploma in order to upgrade your skills, to create more what I call visa competitiveness by changing your occupation up to an ECT. That's a strategy that we're currently discussing with international students as a very viable and inexpensive pathway to the full upgrade. If you're doing a bachelor or master's degree, then we're looking at the 2-year program. And again, the graduate diploma 1-year course doesn't lead to the 485 visa. It's more applicable to people who already have that visa. What's also important if you're doing a Bachelor or Master's is that you complete a 2-year course or longer so that you're able to access the graduate visa at the end of that. A graduate visa is the pathway of work rights for 2 years or longer. If you study in a regional campus, there's a potential for that to be a 3-year temporary visa to give you all the tools you need to then move forward to various skilled migration outcomes. So at the end, potentially at the end of the studies, we're looking at the skilled migration options for the points tested visas, the state nominated regional provisional, state nominated permanent 190 and the independent visas. Each of those visas has different criteria. The criteria relates to the points test, which relates to not only your age and your English work experience, whether you're married and unmarried. There's a whole range of factors that needs to have an individualized assessment. We can't go into that here, but that's where seeking specific migration advice at that time to determine what your competitiveness is. If you don't have enough points because your age is too old for certain things, you might need to look at making sure that you can qualify for a regional visa where more points can be gained for that as well. Studying in regional areas gives more points. So there's a strategy that needs to be looked at the beginning of your studies and during and after the studies as well to realign your points to the visa requirements. So those visas that we look at, we've got pretty much 3 skilled migration visas. We've got your regional 491, we've got the state nominated 190, which is a permanent visa, and the independent 189, which is also a permanent visa. In a graphical sense, if you're a graduate diploma, if you're a 485 visa holder and you want to look at that graduate diploma strategy, then we're looking at, you've got a 485, you have that now, it's valid for more than a year, it's normally 1.5 to 2 years on that visa. And so you're going to enroll, and you could enroll online or you could enroll face-to-face and study for 1 year. At the end of that, then potentially you've got the ability to compete for one of those 3 skilled visas, depending on your own points profile and other relevant factors, such as what the individual state government's criteria might be. They might need a particular set of experience or English requirements to be met as well, or residency in a particular regional area. So again, that goes into looking at the strategy at the beginning of the course and trying to make sure that you've got the best chance of return on that investment. If you're going to study the full 2-year course or the bachelor, then we're moving back to that student visa first, but then launching into a 485 visa, which is going to be for at least 2 years. If you've studied in a regional campus, then there's a potential for a 3rd-year extension on the graduate visa to give you even more time, which is again what I call more return on investment, more security against immigration rule changes, and then to look at again those same 3 visas from a competitive point of view. To look at the actual individual or specific criteria around those visas, that's where qualified immigration advice is necessary. Now, in summary, what we really need to just, keep our eyes on, keep our minds focused on is rules are going to keep changing. So you've got to keep refreshing that advice, asking as many questions as possible, preferably from a registered migration agent if your questions relate to immigration policy. The point system will change, and again, those things need to constantly be reevaluated, or you might change your points because you just get older or you get married. Things like that will affect your points system as well. The state governments control the 491 and the 190 visa. Each state government sets its own occupation list, its own criteria, its own allocation of numbers. So again, that's got to be looked at. And a lot of the states give more benefit if you study in that particular state compared to if you've studied in a different state and then are trying to seek nomination under Queensland if you're a New South Wales graduate, for example. So again, that's where questions around, is it better to study on the Gold Coast? It's a regional area. It's Queensland. What's the Queensland view of early childhood teachers? And getting an understanding around that as well. The skills shortages will be different all over the country as economies and things are always going to be different. One thing we do see is at a macro level, there are skill shortages across the country, but in certain areas of the country, they're even more dramatic. sometimes in regional remote areas, it's really critical. And again, looking at those things and getting advice around the actual labour market and the job outcomes for that occupation at the other end of your studies. The extra points that can be gained as well if you choose those regional areas can also be invaluable to create more competitiveness for the visas at the other end of that. Studying in regional areas gives those extra values. Studying in a regional area where there's a growing demand for ECTs doubles up your, what I call return on investment risk proofing of your studies, as opposed to staying maybe just in Sydney. You know, what we do see is, yes, there's a large market in Sydney, but it's also a more competitive market, and that can affect the competitiveness for the visa. Moving to regional areas where there's still going to be a lot of growth in early childcare need, which is population growth in the country, and not a lot of universities producing ECTs, makes you far more attractive in terms of immigration policies at the other end of your studies. Also making sure that it's, you know, looking at that internationally recognised nature of the degree. Australian federal universities will of course have that best quality standard assured in your choice as well. Might not be the cheapest options, but certainly a much higher and internationally recognised standard compared to maybe a private provider. Not always, of course. In closing, I'll just leave you with some other key principles around planning and migration future. Please ensure if your questions relate specifically to immigration policy that you seek advice from registered migration agents. Make sure that you can identify that a registered migration agent is registered on their website, on their business card, and ask the key questions. You need someone who specialises in this particular area, advising international students, looking at general skilled visas, looking at state migration and analysing those relevant areas, and has the experience over years to see what the barometer is, what's going to change, what's not going to change. That's the types of things that you need to really understand. A little bit more background about me, so that gives you a clear understanding. Yes, I'm a registered migration agent. I'm a former national president of our industry association, and the way in which you can check all of those things is to look up a registered migration, someone who says that they're migration agents, and look up their website, look up the MARA to check that they are registered. Thank you very much, and we look forward to helping you all in your journey in early childhood teaching and training.